It's actually a very perilous time for the
Yeah.
monarchy. Nothing ever goes according to plan for Charles. Family were very much aware of Harry's fragility for a very long time.
It's a really fabulous book. I think it's binge worthy. It really is. It's kept me up at night. And that's very difficult to do because I'm asleep at about 9:30, but this has kept me up like nothing has. It's
Oh my
brilliant.
gosh, I'm so happy to hear it. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah. So it is. It's sort of breezy. It's got such great anecdotes. It's wonderful. It really is. And in some ways, it's 25 years later after Diana. It's about 15 years later from your last book. Okay, let's start at the end where you talk about, where you've said many times in your interview that Britain won't know, you won't know how to be British without the Queen, right? And now we've just finished her Platinum Jubilee celebrations. We're right almost at the end of an era. So I wanted to talk to you about that. What next? I mean, when she leaves, it's going to leave.
It's actually a very perilous time for the monarchy because the great thing about the Queen has been, while all the madness happened all around her all the time, with her family in the 90s when everything went crazy, with Diana and the divorces and Windsor Castle was on fire. And I mean, it went on and on. Prince Andrew, it's all just been chaos around her so much. But she was always the still center of the storm. It was always, everything would be okay ultimately because she was there to keep calm and carry on.
Exactly.
Well, 70 years she's been there. And now, of course, we're at a moment when things are very fragile, but we will not have her to keep calm and carry on because, she is not in good health. I mean, people are poised for what is known as Operation London Bridge, which is the code word for when the Queen finally, does leave us. And people are just poised. I mean, every 2 days I get someone asking me to write an obituary of the Queen, because people are poised. So there's a big sense of anxiety about that and a desire now for Prince Charles, obviously, to be kind of buffed up and strengthened in his whole persona. And just when that is trying to happen, of course, there's been a recent scandal that was suddenly revealed that he took suitcases of cash from, a UAE dignitary.
Yeah.
Not for himself. I mean, one should hasten to say, certainly not for his own spending joys, but for his philanthropy. And it makes people concerned about his judgment again and a question of how he's going to manage, because he actually was doing pretty well until that moment just recently.
Yeah.
So there's an anxiety about that. There's anxiety about, honestly, how they're going to keep Andrew quiet. I mean, in medieval days, Andrew would have been banished to some castle in Scotland and, or frankly beheaded for what's happened to him. But, where do you stash a very healthy 62-year-old man who hasn't got the memo that nobody wants to see him anymore? I mean, there he was on the day of the Order of the Garter ceremony, the most illustrious, dignified, ceremony at which, at Windsor Castle, which happens annually, in which this year, Camilla was being given the Order of the Garter as a great sign of respect from the Queen. What happens? Andrew tries to get in on the act, tries to push his way in, insists on being there, until Prince William and Charles basically put their foot down and said, no, he can't be there. So you get a sense of a lot of, perilous stuff happening behind the scenes. And the question of where the monarchy will go now, I mean, the fact is that there isn't a great movement to get rid of the monarchy, but I don't think that Britain would tolerate a weak or in any way disreputable monarch. In past centuries, it hasn't really mattered, but it would matter now. We've had 70 years of an unblemished record of the Queen, and no one's going to put up with anything less, is the pressure that they face.
And I also think what's happened is, in some ways, the Queen has represented, and certainly now, a certain sense of integrity. As Britain taught us politically, with Boris Johnson, with a series of PMs, where politicians really have lost, in some ways, their sense of, not propriety, but, there is a certain sense of disillusionment.
Well, absolutely. You could not be more right. I mean, frankly, the most poignant example of that was just the imagery of the Queen sitting alone at her husband's funeral,
Yeah.
married for 6 decades, but couldn't sit with any friends or family. It was a tiny little funeral. She couldn't honor her husband in the way she wanted because she was so dutifully following COVID rules. That very night before, Boris Johnson had hosted a bibulous party at Downing Street, breaking all of his own COVID rules. It was such a sort of duality. And I thought it was interesting that the only person who got booed at the Platinum Jubilee was Boris Johnson. I mean, Harry and Meghan, got cheers that I would say were not, raucous cheers, but at least they were greeted. But Boris Johnson, he got booed. And I think that really says a great deal.
You interestingly talked about Charles. And I think, what I love about this thing is that you have these wonderful, you have this great imagery. You talk about him as the man who's been in the waiting room for so long. And, you talk about really how he is going to be, in some ways, if he recovers from this, and which he shall. But, with Charles, as you said, there's a sort of calamity Jane sort of thread that runs through his life. I mean, when he was going to marry Camilla, I mean, it was like, if it wasn't real, and it was a film, you would think, oh my God, this is just...
You did not make it up. I mean, even the Pope died on his wedding day. I mean, one of the things that Charles likes to say about himself, which is kind of sums him up, he always goes, oh, just my luck. Just my luck, this happened, just my luck. And I'm afraid it is just his luck.
Exactly.
I mean, nothing ever goes according to plan for Charles. And, no sooner does he set foot abroad, hoping that he's going to get publicity and plaudits for, his environmental agenda, when one of his children does something catastrophic at home. Actually, in this last instance, he's had luck for the first time in his life, because the cash being delivered to him in Fortnum and Mason bags for his foundation was dominating the news, until, of course, Boris Johnson got toppled and the Prime Minister of Japan was assassinated. So I will say, one of the things I thought today was, well, that's been good news for Prince Charles.
In some ways, I think the heroine of this book really is Camilla.
Right. I mean, Camilla, I became very fond of Camilla in the course of this book. She is humorous, gracious, strong, salty, robust. I mean, and she just simply gets on with it. I mean, in a way, she resembles the Queen. She doesn't complain. She doesn't explain. I mean, she's had worse press than anyone could possibly imagine. I mean, over the course of the years, the press have called her old hag, old witch, old bag, old trout. I mean, in fact, she often signs her letters to Charles, your devoted old bag, because she's been called an old bag so many times. But, she laughs about it. I mean, I'm sure it's caused her some pain, but, she has just sort of, got on with it. And there is something very appealing about that. Again, I mean, when we talked about people not knowing how to be British anymore when the Queen goes, there is a lot that people love about the British character in Camilla. She's absolutely a quintessential keep calm and carry on kind of a woman. And she does it with a lot of a great sense of humor, which is what people like about her enormously, is that she laughs and laughs, and being in her company is always a lot of fun, everyone says, who know her well.
Also talk about a calming effect that she has on Charles, where you say that for once he was really happy.
I call her, the horse whisperer of his emotional needs.
Horse whisperer of his emotions, that's true.
I mean, she knows how to give him tough love when necessary, where she'll say, look, for goodness sake, give me that drink, I'll do it. Don't ask the butler to do it. I mean, she's very forthright, but he takes it from her because he knows it's done with, a lot of love.
A lot of this is also about Diana. You talk about how Charles is still, while his mother's helped him exorcise her ghost, or exorcise Diana out of his life. In some ways, when Charles becomes king, do you think Diana will hang around as a ghost in a way because she was so loved and he had to really fight to be accepted at this space?
The ghost of Diana was beginning to settle, but now we have really, in Prince Harry, another flamethrower just like his mother. And he's sort of constantly evoking her name when he throws his bombs. So actually, I no longer think that Diana's ghost is really exorcised, because I think, for a start, the boys are determined, as any sons would, in making sure that their mother is front and center. And in the case of Harry, he uses Diana really as his sort of standard bearer of grievance, essentially. And people again and again keep saying, well, Diana would be really pleased with the way, Harry has rebelled and has left. I actually don't think that's true. As a matter of fact, I mean, one of the things that I find so interesting about Diana is, although she was such a bomb thrower, she was also a monarchist. She would not have left the royal family if she hadn't got divorced. I mean, her grievance really was not so much just, she found the palace maddening and stuffy and oppressive, but she also understood what monarchy gave her. And she understood that when she shook hands with the AIDS patient without gloves in the walkabout in Middlesex Hospital in London in the early 80s, that actually that gesture had its potency because she was the Princess of Wales, because she was royal. She never gave up Kensington Palace. She did not flee the country and go and live in California or Paris. She stayed very firmly in Kensington Palace and always felt that being royal, was a quintessential part of her identity, actually, and an essential part of her ability to make changes. So it's an interesting difference. Which I don't think that Harry has really grasped, actually.
You write in the book that the Queen said never again, but somehow this is a lesson that keeps coming back. This idea of modernization, the idea of what role the princess will have. You talk about that as with Princess Margaret as well as Diana. And then Meghan. What role do princesses actually have in this whole space? It's sort of if it was in therapy, this is the same motif that sort of keeps coming back. So
it does keep coming back. Well, because the family is human, and women of spirit and passion come into the monarchy and are unmanageable, as they are in any family. I mean, Diana was a real there's no doubt that she truly was a transformational presence in a way that none of the others were. I mean, Margaret was a rebel. She wanted love. She felt ill-used by having not enough to do, etc. But Diana was a transformational presence. She really did have a vision of what she wanted to do and proceeded to do it, essentially, and in a way changed the face of monarchy forever by her humanitarian gifts, essentially, and her desire to show what she could do with this extraordinary position. Instead of just doing kind of retail walkabouts and going to various countries and shaking hands, she turned each of those moments into something of enormous meaning.
At a different level,
a completely different level. And so, she's not an easy act to follow, because she was also such a kind of tremendously interesting mixed bag of, not everything admirable about her either. In fact, in this book, much more than in the Diana Chronicles, really, where Diana was, obviously it was her story. But in this book, I've really tried to talk about the impact that Diana had as a mother on her boys, and how it wasn't all good, that the boys, in a way, as one would expect, they lost their amazing mother at the age of 36. She was a wonderful, beautiful, loving, caring mother. But she also caused them a lot of pain. I mean, she did. I mean, doing those TV interviews where she went public with her affairs with James Hewitt, where she, denigrated their father and so on. I mean, these boys had to watch this on television, and they were at school being teased. They were in tremendously, it was a tremendously painful thing for them when all of this public scandal around their mother all the time, much of which she generated, is the truth. So, she was a very mixed bag of tricks.
And you bring that out really quite wonderfully, and actually really painfully when you talk about William, and how she calls him a wise man, right? Wise old man. And the kind of, I mean, in some ways it was also very damaging. So, in the sense she caused her children with the same kind of damaging pain as she felt as a child.
Well, I mean, this is the irony. I mean, William, it is true. He was such a kind of prudent, judicious kind of young man that she came to depend on him very much, and sort of, in a way, as a sort of replacement husband sometimes. I mean, and she would bring him into press meetings. I mean, I described how she had lunch. She brought William to lunch with the tabloid flamethrower, Piers Morgan, of course, who now has a major TV story, who was really anathema to the royal family. Anathema. It's inconceivable today that Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, would ever bring Prince Georgie into a lunch with the most aggressive tabloid editor in a kind of ask me anything atmosphere. I mean, she didn't have an aide presence at lunch. She simply, it was like, let's talk about me, and I mean, it's inconceivable to imagine today that Kate would do that with any of her children, because she would feel it's a reckless, crazy thing to do, but Diana did these things. And people forget that, I mean, the effect that must have had on William as he sat there while she talked to Piers Morgan about, her affair with, a footballer and so on. I mean, it was extraordinary.
While William found a way to deal with the kind of pain that his mother, watching his mother sort of unravel in a way, being used in some ways too. I think it's Harry, you find that you've said that he was like not a ticking time bomb. He was certainly very disturbed. He'd been to therapy.
Yes, I mean, in fact, what I found in my reporting actually was something I didn't realize, which is that the family were very much aware of Harry's fragility for a very long time. I mean, they knew that there were real problems with Harry, and it was one of the reasons why they were so keen for him to go into the army, and he was so keen to go into the army. And while he was in the army for 10 years, he was immensely supported, protected. He was a superb soldier, actually, and he loved it. And he loved it because he felt the protection, structure, privacy that you get essentially by being part of, a military team, treated like everybody else, and shielded from the press. And he actually found, he was more at home, frankly, on the front line in Afghanistan than he was being photographed coming out of nightclubs. He actually felt that this was his manly fulfillment, and he was a leader. I mean, Harry proved that he was a leader of men in the army. He was very successful in the army. And it was actually a tragedy for Harry that he had to come out of the army. And everyone in the family was very nervous when he came out of the army, because they knew that he was a bit of a ticking time bomb. I mean, at Eton, he used to get into to fights at Eton. Unfortunately, he was not academically bright. He was always very good at sport, which is a great help. But, he shouldn't really probably have been at Eton. I probably wouldn't have been at Eton if he hadn't been a member of the royal family, because academically he found it very, very hard to keep up at Eton. So he felt secondary all the time to William, who was, able to keep up. William was no academic star, but he was perfectly fine academically. He didn't find it hard to keep up as Harry did. So he's, they understood that he was fragile. And then he started to get these panic attacks, these fury that he felt towards the press, which, as I report out in the book, I do understand, having spent time now looking at what he endured, because, from the time he was an adolescent, Harry was hounded and hounded. He had people, press, tabloid reporters stalking him. He had them, hacking his phones. They hacked the phones of his girlfriends. They wiretapped him. It was just hideous what they were doing to him. And you understand why he ended up, having lost his mother in that press fracas in the Paris tunnel, and having had his girlfriends, hounded by the press. It left him with a residue of enormous anger. And it was very, as we say today, triggering. Every time anyone from the press emerged from the shadows with a camera, he would go absolutely ballistic, turn the car around, and that was the end of the evening. His former girlfriends, I was told, just found it maddening, because they'd been going out for the evening. One guy with a camera would come out. That was it. He would just do a U-turn in the road and just squeal back in to his apartment, his little house at Kensington Palace, order in pizza. That was it. No more going out. He was absolute, and he'd be in a sulfurous mood, for the rest of the night. So this was something he found very, very difficult.
In some ways, it's sort of contradictory, because on one hand, while Harry is very uncomfortable, hates almost the press. However, on the other hand, his whole life now depends on being covered. And his wife, Meghan, in some ways may not be like Diana, where she's sort of actively feeding it, where there is this sort of relationship which is toxic, but she needs it to sort of exist. So how do you think they're going to manage that contradiction? And then
well, I mean, I think it's, this is the thing that really has shattered and baffled his family. I mean, I'm told that, they always expected that many of them did expect Harry to bail out of the royal family. They knew he was fragile. They thought, if he could find a way, he probably would. But nobody thought that he would go off and live a life of a celebrity, sort of Instagrammer, in Montecito. They thought, because he used to say it, that he would be off in the country, probably farming in Scotland or somewhere, or more likely they thought, because he loved Africa, perhaps a farm in South Africa where he would, be off the grid almost. That was the expectation for Harry, that if he chose to go, it would be to be sort of off the grid. No one thought that he would choose. In fact, I mean, he right now has, reality show cameras in his house in Montecito because of a Netflix sort of, reality show on his life. I mean, no one expected that. And there's an enormous sense that he has kind of gone off the rails. They don't understand how he could want this. And more important, as far as they're concerned, more devastating, let's say, aside from the Oprah interview, which is a whole other question. But, the fact that Harry is now writing a memoir really has upset the family, because it's like it's hanging over them. They don't know who he's going to blame or trash. And there's a great fear that he will lay into Camilla and his father and his brother. And, no one expects him to say anything amiss about the Queen, but there is a real fear of what he's going to say about the family, just at a point when they're really fragile and where the Queen is, poised, frankly, to exit the scene.
Yeah, I mean, he's been paid $20 million, so he's definitely going to name names, right? It's a tell-all. There's no way you're not paying for him to sort of...
Yes. He's not being paid $20 million to talk about his life in the army, for sure.
Definitely not.
And, my view, and I've said it, is that they should pay him to withdraw it, because I don't see how the family can really deal with yet another round of toxic revelations from Harry. The upset, the scandal, the having to deal with it, the discord. It's actually really damaging for the family. And there's no doubt that, the Oprah interview was extremely damaging for the royal family. I mean, I think that they feel they may have got beyond it, but it was something that devastated them. And, they're very anxious about it.